welcome back to the She Shed. Today's tutorial is going to be on my two-tone cardigan using this absolutely gorgeous yarn called Reborn by Lamia. I bought this from Hobium. Now unfortunately it doesn't have a name. There are a variety of colours. All of them would pretty much go with each other, so check them out and see what you would like. It is a beautiful yarn and it is 40% wool, 40% polyester and 20% acrylic. Fortunately they don't have names, so they only have a code. There are a whole variety. Mix and blend and see what suits you. What hooks we will be using? We will actually be using two hooks. We will be using a 6mm hook for the body of the garment, so that is our pink, and then the grey will be used with our 5mm hook, and that will be all the cuffs and the trimmings. So these are my furl hooks. You will also need a yarn needle, pair of scissors and stitch markers. If you are interested in these stitch markers, we do make them ourselves, and check it out on our website at luckyplatypus.com.au. Let's get this project started. Now while working this project, I will be making a size 16 to 18 cardigan using this yarn. You will need just over 7 balls of the pink and just over 1 ball of the grey. The cardigan that is pictured at the beginning of the video is a size 12 to 14, and I will list all the measurements as I go along down below, and I will put in the description what amount of wool that you will need for that. I should say yarn you will need for that. Where we are starting is from the base of the back. We work up all the way up, then we work the 2 panels. Then we come back to the arms and we work the arms from the sides and down. Then we sew up the arms, sew up the sides, and we are done. So we're going to start off with the ribbing down the bottom of the back. So get your 5 hook and chain 9. Missing that first chain, we are going into this second chain, straight into the top of it, and we are going to do a single crochet. And we will single crochet all the way down, so you should have 8 stitches of single crochet. Then chain 1. Turn your work, and then repeat single crochet in the top of each of these stitches. So you go into the V, point through towards the back, bring your yarn through and do your single crochet. Now you will be doing this if you are working a size 16, then that's Australian 16, then you will be doing about 83 rows. You are looking at, let me just check, it is 72 centimeters. So continue your rib stitch until you have your 83 rows or 72 centimeters long. And I'll meet you back at the end of that. When you have finished your 83 rows, change your hook to your 6mm and chain 1, turn your work, and you're going to be putting a stitch in the top of each row. So each row is really easy to see because it's either going in or sitting out, so a valley or a hill. And you're putting a stitch at the top of each one of these, and therefore because you have 83 rows you'll need 83 stitches. So this is where we're going to do half double crochets. So yarn over, go into the top of the row, grab your yarn, pull it through, grab your yarn, pull through the 3 on the hook, and you'll be doing this at the top of each one of these rib rows. And when you have done that, come back here and I will show you what to do next. Now that you have created your 83 stitches on top of your rib, we have finished with the grey for now. So snip that off, bring in your pink. Bring that through. Chain 1. Turn your work. And now we are half double crocheting on top of the previous row, and you will be doing this for 62 rows, and it should measure about 72 centimeters. So I'm going to leave you to do your 62 rows. And a nifty little trick, if you would like to use this trick, is to, every time you have 10 rows, put in a stitch marker on the 10th row, and then you only need to count the stitch markers and not have to continuously count every single time you want to check. That's my little trick that I use. Alright guys, I'm going to leave you to continue doing your 62 rows, and I'll meet you back here when we come to the top of the back and we start doing the front panels. Once you have finished your 62 rows, you now need to mark out where your two side panels are and where your neck is going to go. So what you need to do is count 33 stitches and mark on your 34th, and that mark there is going to be the first stitch of your neck. Count 17 stitches between and mark on your 17th stitch here, and that should leave you 33 stitches on the other panel. Now if your stitches have gone all funny and you have more than what you thought or less, it doesn't matter, as long as the two side panels, this one and this one, on either side of your stitch marker is even. That's fine, and have roughly about 16 to 17 stitches in the middle here to make your neck. Once you have marked that out, then we're going to work each panel separately. So this first panel, you're just going to continue on going backwards and forwards. So for the first row, continue with your half double crochet and just work all your stitches to the stitch marker. When you get to your stitch marker, don't put a stitch in there, just put the stitch next to your stitch marker, because that stitch I've made, for me, I've made that the first stitch of my neck. So when I've got to that stitch marker, that's the end of that row, chain 1 and continue. Turn around and continue doing your panel. Now what I like to do is on that very first row that I've just done, I'd like to get a stitch marker and mark it. That is my number 1 row. So that first row you just did, you just finished it. There we go. And there's my stitch marker to tell me that that's row number 1. This is now what you're doing is repeating your 62 rows, because you've got to match that panel to your back panel. So continue doing this panel 62 rows, and when you get to the end of the 62 rows, I'll show you how we do the matching border, so the rib border. So this is row number 2 of my 62 rows, and I'll meet you back here after I've done my extras, my rest of them, which is another 60 after this one. So making a total of 62 rows. I'll see you then. After you have finished that first front panel, we now need to do the bottom ribbing so that it matches with the bottom ribbing of the back. So the first thing we need to do is change over to our yarn and do the single row of half double crochet. That just makes a really nice neat edge, and that transition between the pink and the grey. So I don't need this yarn anymore. I have actually finished with this for now. So I am going to snip it off, bring in my grey again, then I will chain one, turn my work and do one row of half double crochet. Once you have finished your one row of half double crochet in the grey, you now need to change your hook to the smaller hook, the 5mm hook. And now we are going to be chaining 9 because we need to do the rib, and the rib will marry the rib down on the other end. So we did 8 stitches in our rib stitch here, and so we need to do the same for this side. So it's 8 plus 1, which is 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Turn your work, and because we're doing the rib stitch, now we're going to be doing each stitch into the V of the front, missing that first chain. So go straight into the second chain. You're doing your single crochet, remember, single crochet straight into each stitch, and you should have 8 stitches when you have finished along this chain. So that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay. So it does look like this will be very tricky, but it actually is quite a simple stitch, just when you get your head around what's what. Now I hope you can see this because it is a dark colour, but what you need to do is the next 2 stitches along, you need to do a slip stitch. So here's stitch number 1. So we go straight into there, grab your yarn, pull it through, and pull the yarn through the loop on your hook. So there's 1 slip stitch, and into the second stitch, go straight in, grab your yarn, pull it through, and then continue pulling it through the loop on your hook. So they're the 2 stitches there. I hope you can see 1, 2 for your slip stitches. And what you then need to do is go 1, 2, 3. The third one in, we are going to start our rib stitch again. So go straight into that stitch, grab your yarn, pull it through, grab your yarn, pull through the 2 on the hook. So you're doing your single crochet again, and we're continuing with the single crochet all the way up. And every single time I do this, I actually do count my stitches to make sure I've got the 8. It is really easy to lose one along the way. Let me just check that I've got all of mine. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So after you've done your 8, you chain 1, turn your work, and then continue again in the first stitch, not in your chain, in that first stitch. Go straight in and continue doing your 8 stitches down. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And here we go back down to the bottom. We will do those 2 slip stitches again. So we've already got in that one there. You can tell, you can see the stitches in there. So we're going into this one here. We do a slip stitch, 1, 2, and then go back 1, 2, 3, going into that third one and starting my rib stitch all over again. When you get to the end of the row, remember you need to chain one. So I'm at the end of the row, chain one, turn your work, do the first stitch not in your chain, first stitch down here, go straight down to the end, and I'll show you one more time how to connect it to the end, doing those 2 slip stitches. Let me just double check I've got 8, 2, 4, 6, 8, brilliant. And then here's the stitch, go straight in, grab a yarn, pull it through and pull it through the loop. There's 1 slip stitch, 2 slip stitch, 1, 2, 3, I'm going into that third one again and continuing my rib. So I'm going to leave you there to finish this rib stitch all the way across, and I will meet you back when you have finished that. When you have finished your panel, and there's your ribbing down the end, you need to repeat the same on the other panel. So I've already done that, and it's very hard to show you both panels. There we go. And it's repeating exactly the same. My tip is though, start with your second panel from the neck along. So remember you had the stitch marker there, go 1 stitch in from the stitch marker and work that way. That way it keeps this pattern look exactly the same. If you do it the other way, you'll get a bigger gap. You won't have this ridge here. You'll actually have it all plain, and it'll look a bit funny. So because this is the front, I recommend start from the neck and go that way. And then you should have, when you're finished, your 2 ribs down the end, which matches the rib on the back. Alright, when you finish that, meet me back here and I'll show you how you do the arms. Ready to do the arms now. So this is going to happen twice, obviously, one on one side and one on the other. So I'm only going to show you one side and then repeat exactly the same thing on the other side. So what you need to do, here is our neck, and go from either side, it doesn't matter. Go from the edge here of your neck and work your way along and put a stitch marker. So that shows you that is the shoulder, that is the middle of your arm, the shoulder. So put your stitch marker there, and from there count 26 stitches all the way down the side and put a stitch marker there. So there's 26 stitches down the back up to the shoulder where you've marked, and then repeat the same process, but this time count this as a stitch and 1 to 26 down the front panel and put a stitch marker. That there, hopefully you can see, is your armhole. Now remember, this is for a size 14 to 16, probably 16 to 18 actually, and I will write down below here what it is for a 12 to 14. Now once you've worked that out, grab your yarn, go to your first stitch marker, doesn't matter what side you do this on, stick your hook in, start your yarn, pull it through, there we go, and then chain 1, and now what you are going to do is put a stitch in every top of every one of these rows. So see how the rows are, there's 1 row, there's 2 rows, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if you put a stitch at the top of each one of these rows, you will hopefully have a total of 52 rows, sorry, 52 stitches. So half double crochet, and once you've got that in there, you can remove your stitch marker, but there's the one in the top of that row, one in the top of that row. So here's the next row, one in the top of there, and the next row's there, and continue doing that all the way along. And I will meet you back here once you've got your 52 stitches for your arm. Now you have your 52 stitches. We're just continuing with the half double crochet as we've been doing throughout the whole of the project. So chain one, turn your work, a lot of work to turn, and just continue with your half double crochets all the way along. And you will now be doing a total of 37 rows. So row one is the one where you put the stitches in and you created those stitches, and now there's another 36 rows to go above that, so a total of 37 rows. And when you have finished that, meet me back here and we'll do the cuff. After you have completed your 37 rows for your sleeve, it is now time to do your cuff, and therefore you will need to change to your grey. Now before you snip off your pink, because now we're finished with the pink, we don't need the pink anymore, leave a long enough piece of yarn so that you can sew up your arms and down your side. So what I do is I just measure it along and double it to what I think would be the right amount, but it might not be, but at least you've done the best you can. Now, and I double it, and then I snip it off, and because you're going to have a big long piece of yarn in your way, I just roll it up and then I clip it to the body of my work, just like so, so that it is out of my way. Now bring in your grey, and we're doing one row of half double crochet in the grey. So just chain it on. So chain one, turn your work, and do your half double crochet for this row. When you finish that row, remember now we need to change our hook to our smaller hook, our 5mm. And now we are going to be chaining 9, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and we're going to do the edge exactly the same way as we've done the edge throughout this project. So remember, you're missing the first chain and you're doing a single crochet in every chain. Check that you have your 8 stitches, and then remember you're doing your slip stitch in the first 2 stitches, 1, 2, count back 1, 2 to the third, and then start your rib stitch and continue on in that way until you get to the very end. So the same as what you've been doing throughout this project. So I will meet you back here when you have finished doing the cuff of your sleeve. Now that you have finished doing the cuff of your sleeve, you are finished with your grey, so snip it off and then sew in the ends, and there we go, we've finished one sleeve. Now you just need to repeat exactly the same process you did for this sleeve for the other sleeve. When you are finished come back here, there's one more thing we need to do before we can sew this up. So before we can sew this up, there is one more thing we need to do, which is to put the band around, and there's your neck and it goes down. This is way too big to fit into the camera. So we are now going to put a band all the way around, just like on this one here. So our band, and then we are able to have an area to sew on our buttons. You will need to make some buttonholes, but first of all, let's get started on doing this band. Now what you need to do is to, once again, we need to put, we've always been doing that band across first, that one row of half double crochet using your large hook, your 6mm. So we need to do that all the way around, all the way around. Now how many stitches you use is purely up to you, as long as it's neat and even. What I would suggest is try and make 8 stitches along here, because you've got 8 stitches in your rib, 1 stitch in here where you've done your one row of half double crochet, and then in each row here put a stitch. So at the end of each row you're going to put a stitch, and that will make it all even as you go around. Okay, remembering to do this row with your larger hook, so our 6mm. We are going to start off our yarn and then chain 1, and it should be really easy to put your stitches in, because this is the end of the rib, so your stitches will be lined up for you. So you should have 8 stitches along there, and therefore put a stitch, create a stitch in each one of these 8. Then you are putting 1 stitch in that row that we started off with for our that half double crochet row, and then we are putting a stitch in the top of each of these rows along the edge here, and work your way all the way around, and I will meet you on the other side when you get there. Okay, now it is time to place your stitch markers for the buttons. Now this is a little bit hard to show you because it's so big, but as you can see, what I've done is positioned the 4 buttons out. Now you don't have to have 4, you can have 5, you can have 3, whatever you like, but what I did was I started from the top and I placed a stitch marker where I felt was good, and that can be anywhere you like. And then I went down to the very bottom and I placed one right at the edge. So what I did between those two is I worked out for these two where it was even. So what it worked out to be is this one here and this one here. I counted from that one 12 stitches, and then on the 13th stitch I put a stitch marker. Then I did 12 stitches, 13 stitch and the stitch marker, and then 12 stitches and the 13th stitch marker. And that's even. So that's where all your buttonholes will go when we get to that side. But we are starting with this side first and doing our ribbing all the way around. And then when we get to this stitch marker, the first one, I will show you how we do a buttonhole. So now we have done our edge and we are ready to do the ribbing. So what we need to do is remember to change your hook to your smaller hook, chain 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, and skip your first stitch, putting your single crochet all the way down and we're down to the bottom. We're going to do our slip stitches in the next 2 stitches. Then we go 1, 2, 3 and work our rib all the way up. and continue doing this whole process the same as you've been doing previously. And when you get to that first stitch marker, which is all the way around the other side, I am going to show you how to do your buttonhole. The project's so large now, all the yarn's getting all caught up. Okay, so keep going and I will meet you at the stitch marker. Now that you have got to your stitch marker, you need to do your 2 slip stitches like normal into the next 2 stitches. And now you need to chain how many stitches you think you require to make the opening. Now I've got a very large button here that I'm going to be using, and I know that it would be about 4 stitches. So what I'll do is go one, I'm going to chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I'm going to count up 4 stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4, or down 4 stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4. Into that 5th stitch there, I'm going to do my normal rib stitching, so my normal single crochets. Now I do it all the way to the end, and then I just double check that that hole is big enough. So I just slide my button through, and yep, that hole is nice and big enough. Now if you have a smaller button, go less stitches in your chain, but make sure you do the corresponding stitches on the other side. So if you chain 3, you need to miss 3. If you need more because you've got a much bigger, then just go up more, so 5 stitches. Remember, miss 5 stitches on this side and then do the remaining 3. And then you just continue on as normal, so chain 1, turn your work, and continue with your rib stitching as normal. So when you get to that chain, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and I should be on my chain now. I should only have 4 in the chain. You just repeat exactly the same as always. So 1, 2, 3, and there's my 4th chain, and then I just do my 2, 1, 2 slip stitches, count back to my 3rd one, and continue on with my ribbing as normal. And let's just finish this row, and then I can show you what the buttonhole looks like. And there we go, there's a buttonhole. And button fits through nicely, and it will sit like so on the other side. Doesn't matter whether you go that way with the holes or that way, either. So continue doing your buttonholes exactly the same way all the way down, ever many buttons you're going to have. So for me, I'm going to do 4, so I've got another 3 that I'm going to put in, and then when you have finished that, I will meet you back down the end. Now that we have finished our side with our buttonholes, we're finished crocheting, and all we need to do now is cut off our yarn, slip it straight through, and we will sew that in later. And now we need to mark off where we're going to put our buttons. So what I do, it's very big, very hard to show you. So I lie it out flat, and then I line up my sides together, my fronts together. And once I'm happy with where it's lined up, I then move my stitch marker into the middle of the hole, and that should be exactly where my button needs to go. So once I've done that, I will then sew my button up right there. So that's where my button will go, and I'll sew my buttons on. So do that, and then I'll meet you back here to finish sewing up the sides. Because this is so large and very difficult to show you on the table, I've hung it up to show you the buttons now done. And these buttons we make ourselves, so if you are interested in getting any of these buttons, visit our website. So what we need to do now is turn this inside out and then sew up the side. So what you will be doing is, when it's inside out, you'll start from one end. Now remember, you need to match your yarn up with the black or the grey or whatever you want to call it, and then the pink with the pink, and then you're sewing however you want to sew your arm together, then all the way down the side, and then down here, a bit difficult one-handed, you are joining the end of your back and front together, the grey there. And then of course you repeat exactly the same on the other side. Sew in all your tails, turn it back the right way, and you will be finished. You may sew this up any which way you like. I start from where I've left my very long tail, which for me is down by the cuff, and then work my way along the sleeve and then down the side. One tip I will give you is match the two ends of your sleeve together and put a stitch marker in there just to match it up. Keep it lined up so that when you're sewing along, hopefully you won't go out of place. And the other tip I'll give you, if you can and it's lined up already, try and marry up your rows so you're not going skew-if, and it's not 100% essential because it's going down the side, but it is a nice neat effect if you can do it. To start off with, it's going to be a bit tedious because you've got such a long tail to sew with, but simply what I do is I line up the two sides and I just keep making sure that they're still lined up and I'm not going off, and then I don't have any fancy technique whatsoever. I am not the best sewer in the world. To tell you the truth, I suck at it. So I just try and link the two together and just make it as neat and as flat and as close to the top as possible. And constantly checking that I've not moved the two sides together, and constantly checking that they're still flat and even and looking very nice. Okay, I'm going to continue doing this. This is going to take a little while, and I'll come back and show you the finished product. And here we are with the finished product. Now unfortunately it's too big to show you on the table, so I've hung it up. And yes, so this is for a size 16 to 18, even an 18 to 20. It does have very long arms for that wider person, but if you like a baggy cardigan, what I would suggest is that you make the sleeves probably about 10 rows shorter. So I would say bring the sleeves up maybe to about here, and you can see the buttons that we make. And I think the colours are absolutely beautiful. Well, I hope you have enjoyed making this cardigan. If you do, share a photo with me on Instagram at lucky_platypus1. If you are interested in our buttons or our stitch markers, check them out on our website www.luckyplatypus.com.au. And I will leave you there on this one. Check out all my others on our YouTube channel. I have many different things on there. And otherwise, I will see you again at the next tutorial. Bye everyone!